genesis of the project actually was I had been working on a show called Prison Break, and one of my fellow producers actually had secured the rights to the German film Das Experiment, and naturally thought it would be a fit for me to parlay my experience with the prison world into the experiment. And I obviously was very kind of fascinated with Philip Zimbardo's work in the early 70s, you know, at Stanford University with the Stanford Prison Project, and Das Experiment was a fictionalized version of that. And I felt like it was an opportunity to explore more sophisticated themes, you know, in the prison environment, and frankly, kind of in the larger human environment than I was capable of with Prison Break. And so, while I didn't at once want to jump back into the prison world as a genre and as a topic, at the same time, I thought it was a really wonderful opportunity to tell a slightly more sophisticated version of things. You know, as a first-time director, you know, it could potentially be intimidating to work with a couple of Oscar winners, you know, in Forest and Adrien. And the funny thing is I never got that sense from them. You know, they were very collaborative, very easygoing individuals. And we developed a pretty good shorthand, I think. You know, they were very collaborative, a lot of good ideas, and open to ideas that I had as well. I think a lot of different filmmakers have different approaches, but for me, I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to write the thing and to direct the thing, because you know, very often when you're writing something, you can kind of envision the scene in your head, and then to be able to have the tools at your disposal, you know, and the position at your disposal to be able to execute that, I think is fantastic. And at the same time, I think, you know, working backwards from being a director to the screenplay, I think you can have a more fundamental understanding of what that screenplay is, as opposed to one generated by, you know, someone else. So I do think it's, for me at least personally, it's a great way to kind of to make film, you know.
Paul, first of all, is lovely. He's such a gentleman. He's an extremely talented writer, very collaborative director. He's had a lot of trust in me, and really fought for me to do this movie. Paul and I met in India for this. I was shooting the Darjeeling Limited, and Paul was taking a trip, and we met in Jodhpur, and we had dinner one night, and we were talking about it, and he was a really interesting guy, and I had a Royal Enfield there, and I bought a Royal Enfield when I was in India, and he always told me I wanted to do that, and I thought this would be a really interesting character for me to explore, and that was a couple years ago, and the movie kind of went away for a while, and then you know, he really pushed to have me be a part of it, and you know, another thing that attracted me to it late in the game was to work with Forest, because I really think he's so gifted. Travis's journey is much simpler for the most part. He's very clear. He's very present. He's a very present human being. He's like I said earlier, it's important to him to behave with kindness and thoughtfulness in his actions, and he's a pacifist at heart. It's an interesting thing to play a guy who is kind of put to the test, and then to consider all of those things and then apply them in my own life, which is what I have to do with the characters that I play. And they're all very positive reminders for me to be present and not fall victim to you know, other people's problems.
I really did enjoy working with Adrien. I thought it was a great sort of counterpoint, you know, because of the way we started and the friendship that began, and then his commitment to what we were doing, you know, of the torture of the, not just the, when I say, I hate to use, I wish I had another word, because it's an emotional thing too. Sometimes, I guess abuse would be more appropriate, because sometimes I just emotionally abused him. And even to me, the bigger abuse wasn't the dunking of the head or the urination. It was the internal, like the mental abuse that I put him through. You know, I started to talk with Paul early on to try to figure out where I would come into the project, you know, as far as how I would show the movement or the change in this character. And ultimately, through our discussions, I wanted to do a physical transformation, and Paul was very supportive of that concept. He has a lot of internal issues of homoeroticism and things of that nature, which I really didn't take into consideration. Although my character is the one character who gets sexually charged from the environment. But from my point of view, that sexual charge is about actually experiencing power and being able to control people for the first time. He's a conservative guy, suit, tie, buttoned up. He doesn't have very much money. He works for a car place, you know, enterprise, and overseeing the books and insurance and things like that. So his life is really regimented in some ways. And we watch him start to experiment with power. What happens when he has to make decisions and when he's given a position of authority, because he's never been given that before in his life. He's always been the person who's been pushed down, subjugated, abused by his mother in some ways, or by his world, by the fraternities, by the different people that he's experienced or encountered in his life. And he's created a facade, not a facade, he's created a mechanism for coping with his own life.
If you put X amount of people in a space together, they're going to find certain ways to dominate each other. They're going to form cliques, they're going to form power groups. It doesn't matter if it's 10 people or 6 billion people. And so it's a pretty simple, very small and self-contained analogy for mankind, really, in my opinion.
It's an interesting thing to play a guy who is kind of put to the test and then to consider all of those things and then apply them in my own life, which is what I have to do with the characters that I play. And they're all very positive reminders for me to be present.
I think the idea of the piece, the concept of the story of the experiment was really interesting to me. It's always been fascinating to me from the Stanford experiment, and also from like different times and walks in my life where we've been put in extreme environments, and to watch the way those environments affect the individual, and not to really be able to predict at times how a person will behave, or the extremes that a person will go to under certain pressure. So that's really important.